Thank you,
This
Chip.
meeting is being recorded.
And of course, thank you, Paul, who I met in a previous trip to the United States. So really appreciate the collaboration. And as Chip mentioned, I'm going to talk about today what it takes for recovery to hold. And honestly, conservation is often described as a fight against loss, but that's not the story that I'm going to tell today. My story took me to East Africa. I've been a resident of Tanzania for 26 years. The photos that you see here are all photos when I was conducting my PhD research, which was a dissertation on human and lion interactions in the Tarangire ecosystem. That was done under the guidance of Oz Schmidt, who remains an International Council member of African People and Wildlife today, as well as Stephen Kellert at the School of the Environment. And my story is really a story of wildness and wild places. And it's a story of people, a remarkably committed team of Tanzanian conservationists who have been building the African people and wildlife model for the last 20 years. We celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. And it's because of their incredibly dedicated work that I can really speak today of places where recovery is beginning to take hold, where wildlife is returning, ecosystems are stabilizing, and communities are finding ways to live with that recovery, and not just for a season, but for the long term. We'll talk about what that takes. So the question that we are facing today is not really whether we can spark recovery. We know how to do that. The question is whether we can spark recovery and build systems strong enough to carry that success forward. Systems that work not just in good years, but also in drought, not just when funding is abundant, but also when economies tighten, and not just inside protected areas, but across the shared lands where people and wildlife live together. You know, at African People and Wildlife, we are testing that right now in real landscapes with real communities. And Tanzania, to be honest, is one of the few places left in the world, really, where this question can still be answered at scale and in real time. These are the places where we work. The red dot there is our Noloholo Environmental Center, which was built on land donated to us by a Maasai community. We built our programs up and out from Noloholo through the Tarangire ecosystem to Greater Serengeti, West Kilimanjaro, Greater Lake Natron, Greater Mkomazi, and Mikumi. And these are, in a land that holds some of the largest remaining populations of wide-ranging wildlife on Earth, including lions, elephants, and vast herds of grazing animals. Tanzania has a tremendous conservation record. More than 30% of the country is under some form of conservation. Some of you may have heard of the goal of 30% by 2030 for the world's countries' conservation areas. Tanzania is already there. So let's talk about what it takes to hold on to that. This little lioness is named Indito, which in the Maasai language means little girl. She's a little lioness with a very bold attitude, born outside of Tarangire National Park, just near to our environmental center. Across much of Africa, lion populations have sadly declined very dramatically in the last 20 to 30 years, with some populations falling as much as 40%. Tanzania itself holds up to 25% of the world's remaining African wild lion population. So it's a very, very critical country for the conservation of these species. And what I'm happy to say is we don't see that decline in African people and wildlife landscapes today. In the Tarangire ecosystem, where Indito and her pride mates share land with both herders and farmers, lion populations have been recovering, even outside the protected area of Tarangire National Park and Lake Minjar. And that really matters because this is where conservation usually falls apart, where it becomes very, very complicated. But Tarangire tells a different story today. And that's because here coexistence is not left to chance. Indito and other lions have a local force of warriors for wildlife that are helping to keep them safe, responding when conflict happens in their own neighborhoods, in their own backyards, immediately, credibly, and in ways communities trust. They're on the ground working with their neighbors to prevent conflicts with lions. Lions, as you may know, are obviously a carnivore, and when they can, they will take local livestock, cattle, goats, and sheep as prey animals. Living walls are another example of how we are mitigating conflict with lions in Tanzania. These are reinforced livestock enclosures made with native trees and co-developed with community members. And they prevent losses before fear and frustration take hold. They were a Maasai innovation. There are numerous ways to protect livestock against predators across the African continent and beyond, but when we suggested those solutions to the local Maasai community, none of them seemed to take hold. Wooden poles were not termite or rot resistant. Metal poles were too difficult to source and get way out to the bush. But one local community member stood up and said, can't we just plant the trees that we use on the outside of our homesteads as a reinforced boma? And that's what you see in the picture today. Commiphora africana trees that are native, widespread native species, highly drought resistant, that grow very quickly and add height to the fence. Today, there's more than 2,100 of them across northern Tanzania. We've published on their effectiveness, over 98% effective at preventing attacks not only by lions, but by hyenas and leopards, cheetahs, wild dogs, jackals, and other small carnivores. And really, the result is not the absence of conflict. It's really something far more important than that. It's conflict that no longer determines the outcomes. Big cats continue to roam outside of the protected area without the fear of retaliation. And households are able to protect their livestock and strengthen long-term resilience. And what that means for Ndito and her family, this is Ndito with her mother, is they're able to continue to roam free outside the park. Many of the lion prides that frequent Tarangire National Park will spend up to 50% of their time outside of the park. It's very narrow, only 40 kilometers wide by 60 kilometers long. An active lion can walk across the entire park in just 4 days. But today, as a result of our work, Tarangire's lion population has recovered and held ground for more than a decade. So while I was concluding my PhD research at Yale in 2005 to 2012, the lion population was in steep decline. After the installation of a number of living walls in high densities and the work of the Wildlife for Warriors or coexistence officers was in place, in 2015, the lion population began to reverse its decline and steadily grow to some of its highest levels in recorded recent history. And we have held on to that for the last 10 years. And what's exciting is that our model doesn't just work for lions. There's always a lot of questions about scale and impact. And what we've developed is a multi-species model that we have adapted now also to protect local communities from crop raiding elephants, and of course to protect the elephants from retaliation. In East Africa today, while the poaching scenario has gotten under control again, what we're seeing, and a publication by Save the Elephants shows that conflict between people and elephants is now the leading cause of elephant deaths in East Africa. So again, this program is an opportunity to reduce crop raiding responses. And what we've seen in just 1 year of the program in 2025, we saw a 52% decrease in peak season crop raiding incidences compared to 2024 when we implemented this local model. And what that means is that elephant populations can continue to utilize critical corridors without retaliation, and communities feel safe and more secure. We're implementing this program in Ngorongoro, Lake Natron, and also Mkomazi landscape, so in 3 different landscapes at the moment. So the next bit of my story is about Penina. And what Penina is about is who benefits. Rural communities have long been left out of the conservation conversation, and in many rural landscapes, women are the backbone of household resilience. And for a long time, conservation overlooked them even more. Historically, women were not allowed to do beekeeping, but they wanted to. And when we talked about engaging local women in our conservation programs, we asked them what they would be interested in, and it was some type of environmental entrepreneurship work. And so Panina started beekeeping 8 years ago in the village of Lamoti, and she now manages 100 hives. Through our Women's Beekeeping Initiative, conservation has become an economic asset for the ladies. Income flows directly from healthy ecosystems, trees are protected, pollinators thrive, and grasslands matter. And I should note that today is International World Bee Day, so we're excited about that, and we're celebrating that on our online channels. And what we've seen through this program and through the revenue that it derives from the sale of honey and other products like candles and lip balms and lotions that are derived from honey byproducts and wax byproducts, the families invest differently. They invest in education, in health, and resilience during hard seasons. But something even more powerful happens. Women gain, like Panina, gain confidence. And here she is 8 years later as a queen bee, training new beekeepers. And when we looked and asked the women through some social surveys what the most important aspect of this program was, and initially we anticipated it would be the financial revenue, which can be very significant as well, it was gaining a voice, gaining influence over decisions about land, livelihoods, and the future of their communities. Many of these communities, particularly the Maasai community, is highly patriarchal, and so it's been a real effort for the women to get more voice in their local village governments. And when they get more agency through this program and in working together, we work with more than 100 women's groups and 2,000 women beekeepers. What we're seeing is that agency allows them to raise their voice more in their local communities. And what we also see is they invest now in the education of their daughters so that they can change that cycle going forward. And that's something that they weren't able to do before. And really, that's generational impact. And then there's the foundation beneath everything else, the land. Place is so incredibly beautiful. We were just talking, a few people may have been to the continent, achingly beautiful, dramatic landscapes that absolutely captivate you. And this is a beautiful photo, but it's full of invasive species. There's nothing to eat here for livestock or wildlife. It's a completely barren land. But Maria and Johanna can change that. Maria and Johanna, again, adapting our community-led system, track grassland conditions over time. They merge local knowledge with scientific data. And this information helps communities to react to climate variability, to see stress early, and to adjust their grazing practices before a hard season becomes a crisis. And Maria and Johanna also help motivate their neighbors to take action, removing invasive species that take over valuable pastures and filling in gullies to prevent soil erosion. Here, conservation shifts from reaction to readiness. And so what you see here on the right, where invasive species have been removed by local youth and community members, eventually looks something more like a grassland like this, where wildlife continues to move and livelihoods remain viable, really ready for what tomorrow brings. And so on their own, these might sound like separate successes. Indito, Panina, Maria, and Johanna, coexistence with wildlife, women's livelihoods, grassland management. But on the ground, they operate as a single holistic system. Over the last 20 years, we've been developing this system and building a holistic model of conservation at scale. Together with our partners who have supported this work, we've protected wildlife, strengthened communities, restored landscapes, and proven that coexistence can work and hold at scale. And that clear record of impact is the foundation for what comes next, which is a goal of scaling our work faster and better across many of the geographies where we're working and expanding into new geographies in the future as well. So in our next 20 years, we'll be building the next evolution of APW's work, expanding what's proven successful, strengthening the systems behind it, and meeting the challenges ahead. We'll be continuing to support the heroes of this story, which are more than 250 Tanzanians who are working with African people and wildlife every day, teams who live in these landscapes and help their own communities in their own backyards. It's a model that is secured using innovative tech systems. We're a recognized leader in the space, just recently winning the IUCN Tech for Nature Award at the World Conservation Congress. I should mention that our only other non-Tanzanian hire in Tanzania is a very capable young woman who is also a Yale School of the Environment graduate, Liz Narrow, who is the head of our monitoring, evaluation, and adaptation team. And she is quite a genius behind these Esri systems and has helped us tremendously to develop systems like these that can work at scale. With these tools, we're able to ensure communities own and have access to their own data. So each community member working on the project has a smartphone or a tablet where they upload data when they're in the real time. Once our small team on the back just quality checks the data and approves it, the Esri system automatically does small analyses that come back and are immediately visible on that community member's phone. So they are able to share their information widely and rapidly, and we are able to document our impact with a level of detail and confidence that few other organizations can match in this space. And together, we continue to grow our wins, which really came because we built trust and meaningful Tanzanian partnerships. From the local in the initial days and over time to national levels, we took the long view. We work not only with more than 80 communities and local district and national governments, but also have agreements with the Tanzanian National Parks Authority, the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, the Tanzania Wildlife Research Institute, and numerous universities and institutions in Tanzania who find our model in high demand. With African people and wildlife, conservation can move forward these days under conditions that few other organizations are built to sustain. We're a conservation partner built exactly for this complexity. Even as conditions on the ground change, we're not just holding on, we are succeeding. And what matters now is whether we really choose to invest in systems that can endure. Systems designed not only to spark recovery, but to carry it forward through uncertainty and change. This is conservation that respects complexity, even when the solutions themselves appear disarmingly simple. This is Nalatimi. She's standing before the living wall she helped to build. For her, a living wall means more time for income generation and a future that she can shape. For wildlife, a living wall means fewer conflicts and safer passage for lions and other large carnivores. For the land, they mean revitalized savannas as less trees are cut down. Very simple in form, but profound in what they make possible. Resilient families, thriving wildlife, and landscapes with a future. They are our signature triple win. And that's the future we're building at African People and Wildlife, one where conservation endures, adapts, in the words of the late Dr. Jane Goodall, give us reasons for hope. We carry on her legacy in the country that she also loved. And we believe this is the future that conservation needs. And it's the future we see, one wild future. Asante sana. Thank you all.
Wow. Quite amazing. Quite amazing. You want to stop sharing your screen
I
there?
will stop sharing my screen. There we
Yeah.
go. And hopefully there's some time for some questions. I see lots of nice hands.
Yeah. If people have any questions you want to ask? Margot.
Yeah, I've noticed there's and read and heard that there's a lot of irregularity with weather that's affecting the animals and the people and the farming. And I wonder if Tanzania is holding strong with continuous weather or if there's a lot of changes in the climate that are affecting the conservation efforts?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Climate change and climate variability, that train is definitely out of the station in East Africa. Communities notice it, local institutions notice it. It is a tremendous challenge. Last year, we were in a considerable drought. This year, we are underwater. And the prediction for Tanzania is actually more rainfall, but more unpredictable rainfall. So we don't know when it's going to come. And when it does come, it's going to come heavier and harder, which is not necessarily great for your agricultural communities. They don't know when to sow their seeds. If they do sow them at the wrong time and a large rainfall comes through, it washes away the seeds as well as the topsoil. So we see tremendous issues with soil erosion and degradation of the soil quality. And these are just tremendous issues that we face. The pastoralist solution, of course, is reciprocity. So the Maasai pastoral system is built on reciprocity between communities, the ability to move herds across village or what we would consider town boundaries to be able to graze livestock in faraway pastures that may have received better rainfall, for instance, than nearby ones. And this is a key aspect of our Sustainable Rangelands Initiative, which is working to build agreements across multiple villages, multiple wards at a very large level to ensure that that reciprocity still exists in the future.
Can I just follow up on that? Do you happen to know why there's more intense storms specifically in Tanzania, or they anticipate that? Is it because of extreme temperatures, or maybe you know more about this than
It's I'm certainly not an expert, but what I understand it to be is rising ocean temperatures off of the Indian Ocean. So a lot of our weather patterns come from the Indian Ocean. They either go north of Madagascar and hit East Africa, or they go south and hit Southern Africa. And when these systems come, they're just, because of the rising temperatures, they're coming stronger and harder.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Coral, you have a question.
Yes, thank you so much. Laly, thank you for your talk. It was great to see all of this together. And I had a question for you about balancing the Maasai herding tradition with sustainable rangeland practices. So I have done some work in Kenya, and one challenge that I saw is, of course, for Maasai culture, right, the more cows you have, the more goats and sheep you have, that's a sign of wealth. That is your bank account, right? And so there is culturally a desire to have a larger herd. But there were some places that I saw where, livestock were really outnumbering wildlife, natural grazers. And it was hard to, I saw organizations struggling to be respectful of that culture and understanding that that was the local bank account, but also balancing that out with needs for wildlife. So I was wondering how you guys dealt with that dichotomy.
Yeah, that's a great question and a very complex one. To delve a little bit deeper into the bank account, so the cattle are the bank and the goats and the sheep are the cash. So people don't mind spending some cash here and there. It's the cattle that people don't really want to dive into using too much typically. In fact, increasing goat and sheep populations across Maasai land is an indication of higher levels of poverty. It's associated with declining wealth within the community as they shift away from cattle and move to goats and sheep. Now, if you walk into a Maasai community, just as if I were to walk into your household and say, I really think you need to divest, spend some cash or reduce your bank account. I mean, you're not going to be probably thrilled with me. The Maasai feel the same way. So the way that we get at this issue that is, I think, much more culturally appropriate is by talking about grass. There are the three pillars in the Maasai community and in their life is, of course, the cattle, the grass, and the water. And it's the relationship between the three of those that lead to, a sustainable and healthy family and community. And so when we look at grassland conservation and grassland management, we now have teams of local community monitors measuring the quality of their grasslands. It becomes readily apparent within the conversations that at times the grasslands cannot sustain the number of livestock on them. And that's where the communities themselves will start having discussions about livestock numbers. So it doesn't come from our organization, but it becomes inherently discussed by the pastoral councils, the village grazing councils, and the way that they are able to manage numbers of livestock on various grazing lands is, of course, by opening and closing these grazing areas. So the monitors also serve the community in monitoring where livestock is moving. Have they entered areas that have been closed off or not yet open? And this is what helps to address that issue from a culturally appropriate standpoint.
Okay, thank you very much. It's interesting to hear you guys' strategies.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure.
It is.
Are there other people have other questions?
Hi, this is Leslie. I have a question, and thank you again for all the work you do. I'm always so impressed.
Thank you.
Just thinking about the scope of this project that you've entered onto. I have multiple part question. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so I have a couple of multiple part questions, and one of them is, George needs to be muted.
By the way, I was last minute. I got it just before you did. So for some reason.
Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, number one. The scope and scale of your project and how you've incorporated Tanzanians into it is admirable and necessary, as you know. But I'm wondering how much you're able to draw upon conservation successes that also involve the land, the resources, the wildlife, and the people that you have knowledge of around the world. In other words, is there a communication or partnership? Do you learn from each other? How does that work?
Yep, that's a great question. So we, a number of years ago, came together with National Geographic to publish our community engagement framework. And in order to develop that, not only did we take from our own practice, but we had meetings and workshops with key institutions that were leading community programs across the continent that helped develop that. And we looked into, and in the back of that framework are examples from across the continent of other programs that are doing great community-led work. So I think it's really important, as you say, to take lessons from other areas. We, of course, work with a number of partners in Tanzania, including other conservation NGOs and some of the big ones and some that are very small. We have also partnerships across the border. So one of our partnerships in Kenya is with the South Rift Association of Landowners in southern Kenya. And we share the common border along Shampole and Lake Natron. And in that case, we've actually been able to take that database that I was demonstrating. We've been able to share it with them, and we are now what we believe to be the only real-time live coexistence database across two countries, both sharing data and information. So I think that's really important. And the third way that we do that is our active community engagement framework. ACTIVE is an acronym for Access, Connect, Team, Implement, Verify, and Evolve. And it encompasses kind of our entire strategy of engaging with communities. And you'll find often in the development and conservation world, everyone starts at implement. And they miss the first three critical ingredients: accessing the community, connecting deeply around an issue, and teaming up locally. And so with this community engagement model, we have trained conservation practitioners and others across now 7 different African nations. So again, stepping outside of Tanzania, we have hope in the future of developing a digital platform, which will again give other conservation practitioners access to these training ideas. And again, it will highlight not only our work, but the work of other programs across Africa and potentially even beyond. I think that's really important that we do this in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
Thank you. Obviously, I agree. So I appreciate your view because you're the one putting it into practice. I had a follow-up question, which is I'm thinking about not just the sustainability of the local area or Tanzania in general, but also of your organization. Now, I see from online that you have a board, you have a scientific advisory board, et cetera. But I'm thinking about succession planning and top management, right? Because you have to have a management team, and then who do you always want to have redundancy, as you know, so if someone steps away, you've got coverage. And so I'm thinking about not just your position, but maybe some other critical core positions in your organization. And how are you addressing those issues?
Yeah, great question again. And something that's we've taken quite a bit of time to develop a ladder within the organization. So it starts now with junior program officers to program team to senior program officers to director level positions. So, we obviously also want to hold on to the incredible intellectual property that we have, and of course, advance our team members and see them advancing in their lives and in their work. So that's a real critical piece. And as we look, we have a 2030 strategic plan. We also have a 2040 longer term vision. And we have a comprehensive campaign that's just silently launching now to try to put these strategies and visions into a strong context going forward. So it's a 4-year comprehensive campaign. Part of that is to build a resiliency fund that will secure through a quasi-endowment the salaries of our Tanzanian team. So that's another part of sustainability, right? Is how do you maintain this organization? We're also looking, as you mentioned, there won't be any succession on my part, hopefully anytime soon, but it's something I hope that I'm already thinking about. So we're looking internally with our team for key members and sort of building their capacity over time so that when that time comes, we're ready for it. But I think one of the things that we've learned actually over the last 20 years is it's very hard for us to grab someone, out of kind of the conservation world that's already been in it for some time and then redirect them towards our model of working, because it's quite different than some of our other conservation partners and institutions in Tanzania. So what we've found is that growing young leadership from the bottom up has been a much more successful strategy for us in terms of getting the outcomes that we're looking at from our team members, the openness, and then just how bought into it they become, and they stay and they see the ladder now and the leadership potential, and so they're hungry to keep on with the organization. I hope that answered your question.
It does, and I'm really happy to hear that you have upward succession in your plans, but also that you're doing it from the internal as opposed to necessarily external. Your team doesn't always react well to somebody outside coming in and telling them what to do, whereas if you have someone you've already trained in the culture, it makes it a lot easier. So excellent, thank you.
So we've got 3 other people so far that have questions, and I'm just going to go in order. We'll go from Bruce to Paul to Tom. So Bruce, you want to ask your question next? Bruce, I can't hear you.
He has 2 things open. Maybe he needs to open the other one.
Yeah, you're still, I guess, muted or something. Maybe we'll go to Paul, and Bruce will come back to you.
Laly, great to hear from you again. Just a wonderful talk. And, I was just thinking back to the moment we met back in San Francisco in the winter. And we talked about your own journey. I think you were raised in New Jersey and somehow it got to Virginia and there was a stop at Yale along the way and you wound up in Tanzania. And it's always interesting in these talks to me uh, for people to share a little bit about their own journey. How'd you become an environmentalist?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I was born in Munich, Germany, but I grew up from the age of 3 on in rural New Jersey. So I'm a Jersey girl. And as a little girl, I had a dream of wilder places. I'm not going to say that rural New Jersey isn't wild because it's very beautiful and there was a lot of wonderful woodland and places that I enjoyed with my Labradors. But I was looking for something wilder and I was looking for the roar of the lion. And so went to University of Richmond as an undergrad, and in my freshman year, I did a National Outdoor Leadership School course in Kenya for 3 months over the summer. And it was a tremendous introduction to East Africa, we climbed Mount Kenya, in the days before GPS, where we just had a topographic map. It was, we hiked across the Ngurumin Escarpment with the Maasai. We sailed up and down the Indian Ocean in dhows. I mean, it was just, and once I got back to Richmond, everything was about the African continent, not just the
Wow.
ecology, but the politics, the culture, everything was just fascinating to me. And then I was also very interested when I'd been in Africa. We went to the Masai Mara in southern Kenya, and here I am, this young college student, and I had never really thought about the fact that wildlife moves outside of protected areas, and lions are mixing with livestock, and that to me was fascinating. So I started to focus all of my ecology studies kind of looking into those issues, and I was fortunate to be awarded a Fulbright scholarship to southern Kenya for a year and a half. Bought a little Suzuki Jeep, which I called Cricket because of the way it hopped down the road, and lived in a tiny tent that was not much, well, it was a bit smaller than the Jeep. So very austere, and just was really looking at the relationships between local people and the conservation sector. And then I'd already been accepted to do my master's at Yale. I took that research and brought it together with Stephen Kellert at Yale and a couple of his doctoral students. And we published a paper called Community-Based Natural Resource Management, Promise, Rhetoric, and Reality. And the long and short of it is that the promise of community engagement conservation was there in the 90s. But at that time, there was a tremendous amount of rhetoric around it. And the reality was that it wasn't leading up to its ecological or social goals, not just in Kenya, but around the world. And this has become a seminal paper in this space. It's been cited hundreds and hundreds of times, and kind of really set me on my path to demonstrate a better way. And that is, through then my doctoral resource at Yale and the co-founding of African People and Wildlife with my husband, kind of the journey that we've been on ever since. And I think we've successfully done it.
Yeah, great story. Tom.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. I wanted to ask, how intact are the indigenous cultures that you're working with, and how do their traditional values, help or hinder the thriving of the wild environment and also your work?
So it's a good question, and it really depends on the communities that you're talking about. Now, the Maasai community is very, very interesting in that they hold very strongly onto their traditions, their culture, their relationships within their communities. And yet they're also very, very capable of stepping out of that. So a Maasai, can come to the city of Dar es Salaam or the city of Arusha, and they may choose to wear their traditional garb, but they may just leave that aside and be a lawyer or do different things. And then the minute they go back to their community, they don their traditional garb again. They never give up their livestock. They just place it into the hands of other family members, of other individuals. And they really hold on to, I think, the central pieces that are most important. I have a very good friend who is one of the Maasai traditional leaders for the area of Ngorongoro. He's a chief. He's very interesting because he's traveled to the United States several times. He's been to Rutgers. He's been to LA. He's seen quite a lot. But he always goes back to Ngorongoro, and he talks about what they're willing to give up versus what they hold on to. So he talks about, for instance, how the Maasai used to have, big holes in their ears that they would put ornate jewelry and beadwork on. And that was in direct conflict with sending kids to school because it wasn't always, it was sometimes a hygiene issue. And he said, that piece, that's something we've kind of let go. It's okay. We don't mind letting that go for progress, but, we're not letting go of what's at the center of our culture, which is the cattle and the cattle culture and the relationships, very, very complicated hierarchy of leadership within the Maasai community, both on the male and the female side. So that's one community that really holds on to it. Similarly, I've worked with Hadzabe Bushmen as trackers when I was doing my doctoral research. Again, a community that is very much holding on to who they are as a people. And then there's a wide mix. We have over 100 different languages spoken in Tanzania. They still are, but the country is united under the national language of Swahili. And, we have interesting, we're about 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. We see a lot of interesting intermix, and I think it's a population that's very tolerant of the nuances and individuality of the people, but then also our first president, Nyerere, really brought people together as Tanzanians first and tribal second. And I think that's why you see in Tanzania less of the tribal conflicts that you might see, for instance, just north of us in Kenya.
Wow.
So it's a mix.
And how about their attitudes toward nature, toward wildlife? How do those, help or hinder your work and the natural environment generally?
The pastoralists and the Maasai in particular, I think are a leading example to the world today of communities willing to live with large, dangerous, and big numbers of wild game. They are incredibly tolerant still today of, wildebeest, zebra, buffalo, elephants, giraffes moving across their landscapes. Some of which, for instance, the wildebeest, when the wildebeest calve, they bring a disease from the birthing that can kill cattle. The Maasai know this, and so historically over time, they've learned where to move their livestock during the wildebeest's calving period so that they don't intermix. So rather than go out and just kill the animals in their backyard, they have given them right of way in a sense and moved somewhere else. It's similarly with the lions. That was one of the key questions I asked when I was doing my doctoral research was, do community members still want, one of the world's largest cats in their backyard? Because if the answer is no, the kind of work that we do would be so much more difficult. I mean, if you think about out west, ranchers' relationships with wolves, and the guns come out before the wolves have done, maybe even like entered onto a property. The Maasai feel differently because they have a cultural relationship historically with the lion. They certainly don't want lions taking every cow every night, but they are willing to tolerate their presence, and they do want their youth to hear the roar of the lion in the communal lands. They pass on those stories, and they're tremendous, oral histories and stories of nature that exist in these communities that are just fascinating. So I think, it's truly an example for the world of tolerance in the 21st century.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Amazing. I had one question about animals in that, the you say that the culture is so cattle and sheep and goat oriented. Has there been any attempt to diversify the sort of the livestock to make it a little less impactful on the land? So
Yes, there have been attempts by some large NGOs to, for instance, introduce camels
ah,
into the Maasai culture. It essentially ended up with a lot of orphaned, camels on the landscape, and other organizations then having to form NGOs to care for the camels. I think it's kind of similar to people everywhere, right? You're not necessarily going to just change your practice overnight. And, they didn't like the milk, it's not the relationship with the cow. Some of these, individuals, I have an elder on our team, Elise Morendat, who is just one of the most articulate and interesting individuals to speak to. And he talks about the relationship he has with the cow, and it's not just a cow. It's an animal that was given to him by his grandmother, who was through a lineage of cows that came from a neighboring community that they married into, and there's meaning beyond to that cow beyond her ability to give milk or provide leather in the long term. And that's just something the camel doesn't do it, right? So I think those kind of solutions just don't end up working because they're not local solutions, and what's really key for us is that we in the early years, we turned the question around and we stopped asking about elephants and lions, and we started asking, why do you want to conserve your local landscape? And we started bringing out conservation solutions from the local communities. And those have proven to be tremendously sustainable because they come from the people themselves that have already bought into it.
Wow. Bruce, I'm going to return to you. See if your microphone is
let's hope that this works okay.
That seems to be working right now. So please ask your question.
So thank you very, very much for that talk, Laly. It reverberates a lot with political ecology discussions we have here at Cambridge University in the UK. And my question is, are there any tensions between indigenous approaches, government approaches, and foreign scientists, maybe associated with NGOs?
There are definitely have been tensions. That is actually one of the reasons why we have a partnership with Tanzania National Parks Authority, who historically had more of a fences and fines approach to conservation. A lot of the managers of the national parks thought of the communities as kind of the enemies. They're the people that house the poachers. They're the people that, send the livestock into the park and infringe upon it, or kill wildlife. Over time, TANAPA did its own analysis of their kind of community outreach projects. We're often kind of like, building a school or digging a borehole. And they realized they just weren't getting the good neighborly relationships that, they were hoping for. And that's when we began to have conversations with TANAPA about looking at a more meaningful, deep relationship with their neighboring communities. And so there has been a lot of tension between local communities and park authorities and the Wildlife Division and others. And I think African People and Wildlife sits beautifully on the fence in between those, because we can see the point of view from both sides, and we're looking for where there are shared goals, and we're helping build trust that hasn't been there before. I think, it in terms of the research community, I think people get sick of, people coming in and parachuting in with solutions and not, really uncovering the local knowledge and the local ideas. I think I'm seeing a shift in that. I'm talking about a 30-year career looking at this, and I think in more recent years we're seeing a lot less of that, and they're seeing a lot more interest in collaboration. Universities abroad collaborating with universities in country, pairing up students, that are both local and international, that have skill sets that they can share it with one another and benefit from one another. So I think we're seeing things head in the right direction. For me, it's been maybe a very unique experience in that, I've lived in many of these communities for many years, and I have a Maasai name. And, as a woman, that was even different, just being, a woman in a male dominated society. I was given a lot of opportunity to speak and have conversations because of the educational background that kind of allowed me to stand on, a step up above, where some of the other women naturally in that community would be. And so, I think of that a lot. And we have a African Women in Conservation mentorship program, so that hopefully in the future, the local women that we're working with get that step up as well.
Well,
thank you. That's really helpful.
We have hit the top of the hour. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. It was such a beautiful talk.
Thank you.
I certainly learned a tremendous amount. I want to go. I want to come and visit.
Yeah, but we're there. Please come and see us. Please, everyone, have a look at our website. We're always looking to increase our network, connections, ideas, thoughts. Yaleys are such a wonderful group of folks, so we hope we can interact with you all a lot more.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Spread the word about our speaker series. We with Margot and Hudita, who is in India at the moment. She couldn't join us. A little bit late for her, but she said, "Make sure you send me the recording right away." So anyway, I want to thank you all for joining us, and please stay tuned. Come back next month. We have another amazing speaker. So.
Super.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Kwaheri. Bye-bye.